Welcome everybody and welcome to the session titled Ink, Breath and Remembrance. And welcome you all guys and many, many congratulations to all of you. Many congratulations to you. So I'm going to swing right into the session because we have half an hour. I'm timing this. And let me start with Amlanjyoti, right? Your book is titled A Different Story. Different story. So what makes it a different story for you as a poet? And what is it setting itself apart from? Why is it different?
Can you hear me? Yeah? Audible? Yeah. Yeah, it's a different story because, I was trying to marry the lyric and the narrative. Usually the two are separate. So I was trying to get the two together. So in other words, I was trying to tell stories or tales, tall ones sometimes, with the form of poetry. So that was one thing which I was trying to bring two disparate worlds, each of which has its own histories, paradoxes, all of that. So one was that. The other thing is that it's my third book, so I also wanted the lines to kind of start breathing on their own, and they took lives of their own. So they ran on their own steam. So at some points, it's not like you are fully in control over what's going on while you edit and do all that. But as opposed to my other previous books where it was more terse, they looked more like poems. Here, I let them kind of spread out a little bit.
Yeah.
Let them loose, so to speak.
You're calling them stories. That's 250 pages of what you call stories in poetry, right? So, yeah, I just want to know why you chose these particular narrative. Why do you think that this particular narratives demand a poetic form rather than a novel or a memoir?
Because the form is what I work with.
Yeah.
And I work with poetry. So therefore, the pushing back is happening through poetry and not through a fiction. So I'm trying to stretch the boundaries of what poetry can be. And therefore bringing back the old argument that on one hand the genres are mixing, but on the other hand there is also something very distinct about poetry. And therefore I'm using the poetic form. In terms of structuring the poems, I used a structuring device of the 9 rasas of Indian aesthetics.
Yes, I was going to come to that, yeah.
So, it's one way to look at it is there are the 9 rasas, but when you read up more about stuff like this, you see that there are, some people say that 33 rasas, some people say that these rasas are just one way of looking at it. Then there is theory which says rasa is in the text, some say that rasa is in the author, and some say rasa is in the atmosphere, which is the author, reader, listener, and so on. So there had to be ways of structuring this, and I wasn't too bothered about length. With length, the challenge is how do you structure them in some ways that do not fatigue the reader, so to speak.
Yeah.
So in that sense, my book is not about read it at one go. It's about something that stays with you. You pick it up once in a while, and you find something of interest, and it stays. It's part of the shelves.
Right. I'm going to come back to the Navras again a little while from now. So Ranu, आपसे सवाल पूछ रही हूँ. तो आपकी जो किताब है, this could be a love poem for you. Okay. It could be this could be a love poem for you, or it could be this could be a love poem for you, or it could be this could be a love poem for you, or it could be this could be a love poem for you. So it's very interpretive. So why did you choose this? And what is the correct? How would you say that? What is the right way? Where does the emphasis go?
Well, this could be a love poem for you. Love has many dimensions, and I think that love is one thing that we are all aspiring for. We want it in our lives,
Right.
Irrespective of who we are: an animal, a snake, a bird, a child, an adult, a man in love. But saying, I'm in love with you is one of the most difficult things. It's not that easy to fall in love. And keeping that love intact is another thing, you know. But this particular book is addressed to the many forces that have been there in my life, right from my spiritual guru to my parents and friends, you know, people I've encountered at various stages of my life. It could be a love poem, and the reader has to decide where he stands in this poem.
Right, very nice. So, you know, your earlier collections, they often explored external landscapes and memories, but this book feels more raw and unmasked. Does it mark a shift from observing the world to a direct internal confrontation with grief and vulnerability?
Well, that's a very sensitive question because, you know, as you age, one thing that you begin to confront is loss. Loss of your loved ones, your own family members. You know, as you age, death becomes a reality. And once death becomes a reality, you are haunted by the fact that you too are going to leave. And there is always a void. And I think that, yes, grief is an important theme in this particular collection because aging also has to do with grief. And how do you express that grief? Because always there is, when you talk of grief or when you talk of love, there is always that sense of loss, but also I wish I had loved more. You know, I wish I had spent more time. And especially this is, in this poem, it is, in this particular book, it has to do a lot with the loss of my mother, you know. And there is always that sense of regret that I wish I had given her more space, more time. I wish we had, you know, created more memories. Because as you are growing up, you know, time flies and you are caught up in your own little world.
Yeah.
And so this particular book actually is a tribute to those people whom I loved, I lost. But there is also somewhere that deep sense of regret that, yes, I wish I had more time.
So I will come now to Akhil, a question for you. So your earlier work, like Blood on the Bitten Tongue, that maps Delhi through a queer lens. In this new collection, you've been called an auto-ethnographer. I read that article. I've been reading up, of heartbreak, an auto-ethnographer of heartbreak. Does this reflect a shift from observing the city to exploring the private landscape of loss?
That's actually such a wonderful question.
Thank you.
And thank you for engaging with the work so closely for all of us. I mean, I think it's rare to have both kind and considerate readers of poetry. And thank you for engaging with these questions. Just before I answer your question, I just absolutely have to acknowledge that, you know, some of the first books that I read in my school in Lucknow happened under the great, kind and stern both gaze of my teacher and librarian who's sitting right here. Thank you, Ma'am Husnain. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be speaking about books under the gaze of a person with whom one read one's first books.
That's fabulous.
So it's a bit of a coming full circle moment for me. I'm so glad that you are here. My brother and I absolutely adore you, like generations of students do. You know, it's the journey from the book that you're referring to is like Blood on the Bitten Tongue, which are all poems about Delhi. I lived in Delhi for about 20 years, and it's a kind of city which is not easy to belong to. It's an aggressive city. It's a city of political lines which often divide and polarize people as they continue to. And yet it's a city which is home to so many, and surely they would have had mechanisms through which they make it home. So that book became perhaps a very conscious effort at inhabiting that city and trying to understand it, trying to understand the corners that became your own, trying to understand the corners that through extensive meeting of people, through extensive sharing of experiences with them, through sharing moments of both absolute elation and absolute doldrums with them, somehow left your signature onto the city. Somehow that became your imprint on the city. So in that sense, what made Delhi one's own, that this experience could be, that the experience that you had could only be possible in that place. We all experience grief, love, joy, but the grief, love, joy doesn't hover 6 inches above the ground. It happens in some place. It must have happened at a bus stop, walking with someone next to a college ground, sitting in a classroom with some teacher. Like, the things are always happening in a particular place, and for me, that was Delhi. In that sense, there's a line of continuity between that book and this one, The Last Time I Saw You, in which I had never heard that phrase before, autoethnographer of heartbreak.
It's in the Hindu, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so autoethnographer heartbreak is a little bit of a curse and burden, and joy and gift both. But I think, as Ranu spoke so evocatively about, there are some crucial losses which become turning points in your life, and you will never really emerge from them, but you will continue to process them for the rest of your life. And some of the most evocative poetry I've read is, one of my favorite poets is Aga Shahid Ali, and his canzone Lenox Hill, which he wrote about the passing of his mother. And in this moment, you can get a vocabulary for what is it exactly that you're feeling. And grief is this overwhelming churning which often it's ineffable, you don't find words for. The search for that vocabulary lasted between the year that COVID happened till about 5 years after that, till this book came out. I think it allowed me the search for that vocabulary.
And is the search complete, or is it
No,
going to
nowhere,
continue? Okay.
nowhere near complete, but I think the etchings are there. At least one doesn't know about the final word, but at least what the book pushed me, as it pushes so many of us as we attempt to do similar work, what the book pushed me was to be deeply and completely attentive to that form of grief. And I think the word already channelized that attention. So as long as you were, in different sessions we have talked about what is happening to our attention and what is happening to the rigor of the forms of attention that we are capable of, like almost like civilizationally now. For something to keep your attention for 5 years, for something to allow to be changing shape as you continue to live on, for something to no longer look, so much so that you're no longer looking for some miraculous breakthroughs, but letting that grief percolate into the ordinariness of life. Once you found the vocabulary for that, how it has become the new ordinary, I think that form of attention itself was a gift. What it produces is a separate matter.
Very good. So, Amlanjyoti, coming back to your Navrasas, which are the nine classical emotions. So, what inspired that choice? And which ras was the most challenging to translate into contemporary everyday life?
I wanted to get back to.
Is it audible? Amlanjyoti?
Yeah. Hello? Yeah, better. No, I wanted to get back to the elemental things. Maybe this was now that I think about it, he's mentioned COVID and stuff. So, the rasas are just a way of structure, articulating, putting it in some form. No? But the essential idea was that I wanted to go back to the basics, which is, and these basics don't change even with 2000 years of written word and so on. And that is that we feel grief, we feel love, we feel, and some of these have become unfashionable in academic circles because they are overtly theorized. There's a lot of academic theorization around forms right now which are taking away feeling and effect from, especially from poetry, and it's happening a lot in English poetry outside India, especially in UK and USA. So I wanted to come back to basics, and I feel that the basics don't change. How you perceive those feelings, there is something essentially human about that, and contexts vary. But so on the one hand, on the other hand, I also wanted to write differently, rooted in Indian experience, Indian context. Didn't want to provide explanations, copious notes. So didn't want to appeal to a Western reader at all, even at the cost of sounding indecipherable to such audiences. Right. I think Indian poetry in English also has come of age. There's some fantastic poets writing, uh, and uh, and it's time we acknowledge that, and we don't have to keep kind of looking at some prize abroad to vindicate our existence. I
The
think
wise owl will do quite well, I think.
wise owl is indeed
Very
a great
nicely,
attempt.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm saying it's not just the award. The award is a great feeling. We are very lucky that to write poetry is itself a blessing. To write poetry and get published is a fantastic icing on the cake. And now to be sitting like this doesn't happen to most people. So it's an absolute feeling of it's such a gift. And so coming back to this, which I felt that yes, the rasas were a way for me to come back to basics, but structure it in such ways. And I also wanted to take on, as I said, I wanted to take on this whole idea that, just because I'm writing about the rasas makes me kind of a revivalist or something. It's not a revivalist idea. I'm writing about contemporary stuff. Just wanted to make it the essential elements of what make us human don't change. But how we understand, assimilate, perceive, articulate depends on the various contexts and the various hats and the various kind of pluralities we live with. So, but I learned a lot about the rasas actually after I organized the book, frankly. I was wiser for the experience.
And which was the most difficult challenging Russ to write in contemporary times?
I actually innovated the date. I did some badmashi here. I took out one rasa and added one of my own.
Which is what?
Which I thought, why not? Yeah, somebody's, there's no hard and fast rule that it has to be those 9 rasas. So
Which
I took
one,
out.
like a poetic license? This is serious poetic license here, huh?
Poetic license is always there. It should always be there. So I think I added compassion because I thought that this idea of compassion is something that is unique. I mean, it's not unique. I mean, we all feel compassion, but I think compassion deserved to be in the top 9. And what I took out was disgust. I thought anger is great, but disgust with my slightly romantic appeal to lyricism, very few things I get totally disgusted by. I always have a hat on which is always trying to, even if I completely pissed off, it's always like, okay, why did this happen? And I'm trying to put on some way of understanding. Maybe it's just my sociology training at work or whatever you call it. So, what was the most difficult? I'm stumped.
एक को तो आपने निकाल ही दिया ना, so I'm assuming that must be the most difficult.
Actually, I didn't have any disgust poems.
Right.
So
Okay.
therefore, disgust didn't feature.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe anger was difficult to write about. So there's a poem on a long kind of it's about the Bhopal gas tragedy, and it's called it's called Final Settlement, and it has other ramifications. I mean, the word of final settlement has many things, but it was basically about how when there was a review petition filed to revisit the compensation many years later, how it was dealt with for procedural reasons. And that's where my legal hat came in. So I used the form of a legal case, which is using terms which you learn when you're reading a case, like ratio decidendi, obiter dicta, facts, procedural facts. And I used the form of a legal case, but essentially wrote a poem with many segments inside it. And I thought, why not? So anger was difficult to write about, possibly because I don't know why it was so difficult.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to go on to grief now. Yeah. Do you want more? I'll change that. So Ranu, you describe grief not as a soft sorrow, but as a stalker, which kind of connotes a presence that feels persistent and unsettling, kind of little bit weird. It creates this little vibhitsras, if I might say, in you. So, what drew you to portray grief in this darker way?
Aradhika, ठीक है, this is okay. As I said to you that grief comes out from the innermost core of your being, and there is not just grief is also linked with the process of healing, because when you write as a writer, and especially when you're doing poetry heals in many ways. It's a cliche to say it uplifts your soul, but let me tell you, in my case, anger is another aspect, another emotion. You know, when I get angry, it's not just that when I'm hurt that I pick up my pen. It's also when I get very angry at the system, sometimes at workplace you get very disappointed. There's no point arguing. I just pick up my pen. So in moments of absolute dejection, also celebration, and then, there are different phases in your life when you feel that you can only speak. You cannot speak to the outside world. You end up speaking to yourself. You become your own, you have your own conversation. And I think as a writer, I feel that conversing with myself is one of the deepest dialogue that I ever have. I converse, I speak to myself, I have a discussion, and that's where I put my words on paper. And it not only heals me, it also calms me, it refreshes me, it energizes me in many ways. So grief is just one emotion, but apart from that, there is also this desire to connect with my inner self that makes me write.
That's very good. And do you also find, writing cathartic? And do you also get angry? And if you do, then at what?
No, so it certainly has a therapeutic function. There is no denying the fact that poetry does embrace you, and it embraces every aspect of you. But one of the things that I find difficult about writing about grief, it goes so easy to become self-indulgent, and it's so easy to sort of lose your sense of control. Thankfully, time was on one side. All these 3 books, like one has taken years to write these books, as we were having a small conversation prior to this, and in those 5 years, you also learn to acquire other appendages to deal with what you're dealing with. So I started reading about how other folks have their own vocabulary for grief, how there were other moments in my city in which people reckoned with something as crazy as this. It might not be grief, it might be some other emotional universe. Or in the way for instance, in my book, there are several kinds of moments of rupture which happen. So one rupture might be someone's departure. But there is a moment, like the first time I heard about Ustad Bismillah Khan's death, I was in this particular neighborhood near my university, and the first time I scrolled the news and I saw that, it's almost as if the world froze around you. Because not only, was he an absolutely astounding musician, he stood for a particular kind of world. He stood for a particular kind of togetherness and syncretism. He stood for a particular kind of ideal. Often in practice it wasn't available, but at least as an ideal he marshaled that kind of world, and somehow his going seemed to be the end of that world. And that is a moment which sort of comes again and again in the book, The Passing Away of Ustad Bismillah Khan. In that, one finds a mirror, one finds a vocabulary, one finds a vehicle for one's own loss as well. And unless you find that, grief is, it's so hard to inhabit it without being so self-indulgent or without being lush or sentimental. I'm a poetry teacher. Half the time I'm telling my students to warn against them, against lushness and high sentiment. And yet one finds oneself also spilling into it. So I think other stories pull you back in.
And how did you, same thing, because how did you guard against being self-indulgent?
You see, it's not just one story. It's many stories and many people that you encounter. When you write a poem, you're not just writing about your own self. Basically, if a good poem is a poem that resonates across cultures. And if one has to talk about loss, it's a loss that when you read a good poem, it should resonate with people. And if it does with one individual and she says, oh, I could sense that, loss. And I felt, I could understand what you were going through. And it's not just, as a poet, I'm not just writing about myself. It could be X, Y, or Z, as he said, the loss of the artist. It moved him so deeply that he ended up writing a poem about it. Similarly, there are various instances, basically, I would also like to talk about another aspect of my life, and that is, I'm here also as a disability activist. You see, we live in an able-bodied world where people who can speak, walk, express themselves, and, are able to write about their own experiences, and are also living in an age where there is so much of emphasis on thriving, on, fulfilling one's ambition. I am talking, when I talk of disability, I am talking about the people who are at the far end of the spectrum, people who are intellectually and, intellectual and developmental delays. Children, adults who are also non-verbal, quite a few of them are non-verbal, so they cannot voice their anguish and their pain. In my writing now, I am also trying to enter that world of the voiceless, and what is it that they experience in their everyday journey, because I'm working with them and I see them, I've seen them from very close quarters. So I think that is another aspect. And sometimes your heart, gives a lurch and you really feel, oh my. But when you get closer and you try to get closer to these people, you find that they have a world which is complete in itself. Why do we have to see them as, as incomplete? Yeah. Aspiring for perfection. What is perfection to you is not perfection to me. So as a writer, I try to enter these many worlds that are there, and people who grieve, but there are also people who, despite all their handicaps, their inabilities, their disabilities, they continue to celebrate, and they are in a moment of eternal joy, which is what you call Satchit Anand, because I feel that they are much closer to the absolute, the one that, in this world where everyone is seeking some kind of recognition, to be recognized, to be loved. And then there are those who are different, but they are differently abled in their own way, and they know how to love and live life. So I also want to write for them, and I've started writing for those
That's
people.
really wonderful. We actually have 2 minutes left, and in the last 2 minutes, I'm going to invite you to speak your poem, please, and then we'll close it at that.
Okay. Perhaps in line with what I had spoken about, the poem is called Ustad Bismillah Khan. Once, to an interviewer, he held up his right palm, and in the way his fingers stood, he found Alif, he found Lam, till he could read the name of God. After such revelation, what could his instrument do if not consecrate every sky it touched? The last time I heard him, he had turned each grain of wood in his shehnai into a riverside, each breath into a stunning desolation. What could a child born in the middle of a war promise his world except that there is no faith bigger than the octave? I heard, as if sitting on the last ghat in his city, his final note, so long and so inconsolable, it could hold us all. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, all three of you. A very, very enjoyable session. I wish it could have continued for a little longer time, but well, thank you very much.
Thank you, dear poets. And